Hi everybody, welcome back for another week of Live with Your Lobbyist. Chelcie and Nicole here from Helena, ready to give you some updates about another week in the legislature. So as you guys are getting on and watching us live, please give us a comment, let us know who's watching so we know who's out and who we're talking to.
We want to give you a shout out.
Yes, we shout out. We want you to ask us questions, so please let us know if you're watching. So got quite a bit to visit with you about this morning, and Nicole's going to kick it off with a couple bills.
So there are a few new bills every week, of course. A couple of particular interest happened yesterday on Thursday. So the first one we'll talk about is House Bill 419, which is a Bison bill. You know, every session for the last several sessions we've had a lot of Bison bills, and this session has been more restrained on that front. But this bill popped up, and so of course we're working it. What the bill does is make changes to current statute with regards to what can be done with bison coming out of Yellowstone National Park and the designated surveillance area. So under current law, no bison coming from that area can be transferred without having been declared brucellosis free. So they have to go through the whole process that's done by the Department of Livestock to ensure that they are indeed healthy before they can be transferred. This bill basically just does away with that and says that they can be moved and before they have been designated brucellosis free, and they only have to consult with the state veterinarian rather than go through the steps that they do now. So this is obviously very concerning. A lot of times when we talk about bison, we're talking about the impacts to property and things like this, but this is really specific to the disease of brucellosis. And some points that we brought up with the committee are about the progress that we've made getting rid of brucellosis in this country. We opened up by saying we're pretty lucky to live in a time where these very serious diseases no longer have a big impact on our everyday lives. But it wasn't all that long ago, and many of you probably can even remember when this was a big deal. In 1956, there was a federal expenditure made to start a program to eradicate the disease from all livestock herds. And it's been very successful. Some APHIS numbers on that are very telling. In 1956, they determined that there were about 124,000 herds affected by brucellosis in the United States. By 1992, that number had fallen all the way down to 700, around 700, and today the number is in the single digits. So the livestock industry has done an excellent job of cleaning the disease out of our herds. However, there does remain a reservoir of disease in the greater Yellowstone area, in the Yellowstone National Park, and surrounding areas, of course, in wildlife. So it's really important that we don't lose the progress that we've made. We want to make sure that should any live bison leave the park, that they are only the bison that do not have the disease. It's a very serious thing. And there was a lot of testimony on both sides, of course. This is a very emotional issue, but the committee asked some really great questions, and we will be looking forward to them taking action on the bill, and we'll keep you updated on its progress. So it's actually a pretty simple bill with some pretty broad implications. So if anyone has any questions, please let us know. I see that Nicole Hackley is watching from Sydney. Thanks for tuning in.
Hi, Nicole.
It's great that we have modern technology so that we can communicate with each other, even being, 600 miles apart? Well, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully we'll have more joining soon, and if you have any questions, anyone, please let us know.
I see that Ricky and Lee are also watching from the Mate, so thanks for being there. It's Mate Show Weekend in Billings. Also, big shout out to Nicole since she's watching. Thanks so much for writing those letters on Senate Bill 155 and reaching out to your senators. It was a great example, and we're really proud of members like you that take it upon yourself to do that. So
absolutely,
thanks so much. with that, maybe I'll talk about 155 really quickly. You guys heard us talk about Senate Bill 155 last week when it was heard in the Senate Agriculture Committee, and it is the bill that we refer to as the seed bill. And what it does is it makes the regulation of agriculture and vegetable seeds similar to fertilizer seeds in the state of Montana. And this is a really important bill to agriculture in Montana for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the obvious reason is because it creates consistency between seed and fertilizer laws, which are two ag inputs that go hand in hand for farmers who are planting crops, so it makes sense for them to be regulated similarly. Secondly, this bill would prevent farmers and ranchers in Montana being exposed to potential patchworks of regulation by county by county across the state. And that's something we want to avoid for a couple of reasons. First of all, that poses major potential threats and risks to the transportation of Montana commodities out of the state. We know we aren't necessarily a big processing state, and a lot of our commodities get moved out from truck by rail out of the state to be processed, to be sold and processed. And so if we're faced with a different regulation every time you cross a county line, that does pose some problems for people trying to get their commodities to a place of sale, whether it be a grain elevator or the rail yard or something of that nature. And additionally, we think that farmers and ranchers need to have the ability to make the best business decisions for their family business. And we know that they have the ability to do that. Senate Bill 155 is not about pitting different facets of the agricultural industry against one another. It's not about that at all. What it's about is making sure that Montana's agricultural industry maintains the necessary decision-making authority to make the best use of their natural resources and have access to the varieties of seeds and the types of technologies and the cropping systems that they know work best for whatever climate and environment they're farming in. So that bill is going to be heard on the Senate floor on Monday on first reading. So that'll be a pretty important vote for us here in agriculture. And we sent out an action alert earlier this week. And if you guys saw my really short PSA announcement that was asking you to go and fill out your voter voice and contact your senator and reach out to them, then you've already seen this. But I wanted to show you again. We've got a bit of a visual aid here. I'm going to hold up this stack. So these are a whole bunch of slips of paper. There's several hundred of these slips of paper here. And these are messages that a couple legislators who were on the Senate Ag Committee have received so far regarding 155. And unfortunately, they are not necessarily in support of the bill. And I will also tell you that they're not wildly informed statements about how important this piece of legislation is to Montana agriculture. So I'm using this as an example to tell you, one, please contact your senator. Voice your support for that bill. Make sure they know how important it is. And additionally, I would also encourage you to maybe reach out to some more of our urban senators who are in the Senate, because they may not have a large constituency base of farmers and ranchers, but that doesn't mean that you can't genuinely and sincerely reach out to them, share your story, and ask for their support.
Help them understand.
Help them understand. That's okay. And I wanted to share just a couple of these with you because I think, sometimes maybe it can be intimidating for members to reach out to a legislator and make that contact. But I want to share that it doesn't have to be much. This one just literally says, vote against Senate Bill 155. It says that it threatens organic wheat export. I will again refer to slightly uninformed statements about agriculture. So there's more of those. But point being, these don't have to be long messages. You guys can be clear, concise, you can share your stories, and you can make an impact clearly. So it's really important that we do that, whether it's on Senate Bill 155 or other really important pieces of legislation that we're going to be working on this session, because I would just encourage you to keep this example in the back of your mind and just know that there are others out there who are more than willing to tell agriculture's story if we're not there to step up to the plate and do it ourselves. So please make sure that you've contacted your senator. Let us know if you have any questions about doing that. I do see we have actually quite a few viewers. I see that some of them have told us who they are. So let us know if you're watching. Let us know if you've got questions, and we'll keep rolling on here.
Thanks for tuning in, Shelly. I'm getting lots of people from my eastern Montana counties. Good job. And also, Powder River Carter shared our video. Thank you very much for that. Hopefully that helps some more people get a chance to tune in if they're interested. And I guess that kind of is a good lead into another bill that we worked on yesterday. It's Senate Bill 203. And this is a pretty very contentious bill and a pretty serious bill. What the bill does is it affects the animal cruelty statute. So if a complaint is made against a person for animal cruelty, and there are 3 different statutes that deal with cruelty, and they range from forced fighting to neglect to feed, lack of feed or lack of shelter, and then there's aggravated charges and things like that. But what this bill does is affect how the owner can be charged, and how they can be, what happens to the animals when an accusation is made. So what it does is say that if an accusation is made, a law enforcement officer can go and confiscate or seize those animals. Then they will require the owner to post a bond that will, and it's a renewable 30-day bond, that will pay for those animals' care during the time that they are seized and before the trial is actually held. What makes this particularly concerning is that if a person is unable to post that bond, they will be, the ownership of those animals is automatically transferred to the county. So this is concerning for a few reasons, obviously. Number one, this is a taking of property before a guilty verdict. And also, if a person is unable to post that bond because of a cash flow issue, maybe they'd be forced to sell other property in order to maintain their other property. There's a lot of things that could happen there. So people are at risk of having their animals taken before they are proven guilty. Now, of course, one thing that I made clear to the committee yesterday is that farmers and ranchers make our living raising animals. And there's no one in the world who cares more about the welfare of the animals. They're our livelihood, but we have a passion for caring for these animals, oftentimes at the expense of other needs, so maybe our personal needs or the needs of our families at times. We all know what calving and lambing season is like. So we made that clear, but also brought up the concern about the taking of property. There is a provision in there that that's one line that says this is not meant to apply to cattle, sheep, and swine. Okay, so first of all, that's great that most livestock species are known to not be included there, but the problem with that is it's one line in that statute, and that could be stricken by future legislatures. And a lot of people are arguing that would never happen. You never know what can happen. There's a lot of things that legislators 50 years ago probably had no idea could be a possibility. So that's a concern. And also there are some livestock species not included. Like, for example, chickens, guard dogs. That's what reminded me when I saw the Powder River Carter notification pop up. In sheep country, where we've got range herds and the guard dogs are out there doing their jobs, there are a lot of uninformed people even today who will be driving around and maybe see a dog out there. They want to pick it up, take it to the humane shelter or the pound in town, or maybe even make a claim that the people who own that dog are abusing it by leaving it out in the cold, in the snow, and all of those things. So I think that's a really important point. And also, we all know that as Americans become further and further removed from the farm, there's a lot more people who just don't understand what normal animal husbandry practices are. So we are opposing that bill. We understand that a lot of county attorneys and some county governments are interested in finding a solution to the problem when they do have seizures in these cases, and then the county withstands a huge bill that that will that they are liable for if the owner doesn't pay it. Well, I don't actually believe that this bill actually gives them any more recourse than they currently have in law. And in fact, there are probably better solutions, such as after a guilty verdict, putting a lien on their property, requiring a speedy trial, or what's called a rocket docket, to have a short time between the charge and the trial so that they can proceed quickly and not withstand a lot of expense. So there's lots of other opportunities and to make the counties whole. So we think that this bill needs to die, and hopefully a better option can come forward that actually provides care and better options for the animals, as well as keeping the counties protected and not posing an unintended consequence or a future threat on the livestock industry. So that was heard in Senate Judiciary yesterday. I hope that you will take some time to look at the committee members in there and consider reaching out to them and explaining some of these concerns, because there was a lot of information tossed around and not all of it was right on. So we need to make sure that they hear from livestock owners that have some concerns. So, any questions about that? I saw someone's going to vote. Thanks for that.
Messages. I hope that there's nothing wrong with our feed this morning.
I'm not getting them, so...
Okay. We're using Chelsea's phone, so if there's something wrong with our feed, please text Nicole, because I'm not reading my text messages.
We've got a question here from Pat Hackley.
Yeah.
Was there one before that?
I thought so. There was one that... Oh, Ricky, what about Senate Bill 247?
Well, one of the things that we ask members to do, Ricky, is to not just call bills by their number, because sometimes you can't remember. I was thinking of a House Bill 247.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the title of that bill?
Yeah, what's the title?
Oh, the neonicotinoid bill. That's
Thanks,
a fun word. Our Facebook Live coach just saved us. So Senate Bill 247, here's a Friday fun word, neonicotinoid.
Ooh, she nailed it.
That's going to be coming up next Tuesday in Senate Agriculture. We are still looking at this bill, but I can tell you a little bit about what it does. Is that this is proposes to ban the use of neonicotinoid insecticides in agriculture. And that's a really big deal to agriculture, because those types of insecticides are often the only type of treatment that we have for specific insects in specific crops. One that I know off the top of my head, for example, is wheat. It's one of the only treatments that we have to prevent wireworm, or it is the only treatment to prevent wireworms in wheat. So it's something that is very important to the egg industry. I believe it has been scheduled for the Senate Egg Committee next Tuesday.
So take a look at that.
Yeah, take a look at that one. We will be taking a look at it too. I'm trying to just scroll. We had a couple other questions. Okay, so Pat wants to know, what's the vote on Senate Bill 155 looking like? Has it already taken place? No, thanks for the question. So if you're just joining us, earlier I talked about Senate Bill 155, which is the seed bill. It will be on the Senate floor Monday at sometime after 1 o'clock is when they convene. And we've been working with senators all this week, kind of visiting with them about the bill, trying to establish where we are as far as the vote count. And never say never. Knock on wood. We will do our work until the bitter end. But we're feeling fairly confident about the vote at this point. We still have work to do, though, so I wouldn't ever say that it's a slam dunk and that we're there. You never want to say that with any piece of legislation. So
Plus, we'd love if everyone voted for that bill.
We would.
You know, it's really a common sense bill, and if people really understood what it truly does, it's hard to say why anyone would want to vote against it. So there's always room to make progress.
Always. So that said, I'll say it again. Please contact your senators about that bill and ask them to support it. Additionally, I said earlier, don't be afraid to reach out to more urban senators that may not be your exact senator from your district, but might be involved in agriculture from your region, and let them know why you support that bill.
So we've been talking a lot about, contacting our legislators. Oh, we've got another one joining us.
Hi, Garrett.
Thanks for
going to the
joining us.
Mate Show from Clyde Park.
Everybody's going to the Mate Show. Here we are, slaving away. Hope you guys enjoy the Mate. No, really, we do hope you enjoy the Mate. And stop by our booth. Say hi to our people.
Yes.
But we've been talking, sorry, I just banged the table. That's a little shaky. No earthquakes, don't worry. But we keep talking about contacting your legislators. The reason that's important is because constituents, members of the public, make a real impact. Never forget that. Don't think that that's anything but the truth. You really do make a difference. So, also, I wanted to remind you, there is a program that we have in place, which we're going to start really rolling out and hopefully have it be really successful in the next membership year, is the AAIP, or the Action and Advocacy Incentive Program. And there's information about it on our website. You can email us for more information if you want printed copies of it. But basically, what we're doing is asking members to document your advocacy. Take note of the things that you've done throughout the year, and maybe look at the application and use it as a way to help yourself be even more active and to do more to advocate for agriculture. You basically earn points by sending letters or emails or phone calls to your legislators, writing letters to the editor, attending our Calling on the Capitol, which is coming up, attending interim committee meetings, all these different things, posting on social media with interesting and accurate agriculture information, things like that. So now is actually the perfect time, if you haven't already started, to be checking that out and to be documenting the work that you've done, because we will be taking next year in 2018 3 members to the advocacy conference that's hosted by American Farm Bureau in Washington, D.C. It's just an outstanding opportunity for you to attend, learn more, hone your skills on your advocacy work, and to really get in depth on whatever the topic of the relevant topic of that time is. Like right now, we're really working on regulatory reform at the national level. In 2016, we were working on biotech labeling. So really interesting conference. And then of course we also go and visit with our elected officials. So I hope that you guys will check that out and consider doing it, and just keep working on it. So there's a little shout out for that program. I really hope that we'll get a lot of interest in the coming year.
So one other bill that I'm going to visit about with you guys quickly, we heard this week in House Natural Resources, was House Bill 432. And what 432 does is changes some of the abandonment statute in state law regarding water rights and what constitutes the abandonment of a water right. And specifically, this bill proposes to say that a disruption in your means of conveyance does not constitute abandonment. So I'm sure that everyone immediately understands exactly what that means,
Totally.
like I did the first time I read it. So what that means is, a conveyance, your means of conveyance is your ditch. It's your head gate. It's how you get your water from A to B. So what this bill wants to say is that if something disrupts that conveyance, that doesn't mean you've abandoned your right. On its face, it sounds like a really great idea, but Farm Bureau actually opposes this bill. We oppose it because we think that Montana already has pretty strong language regarding the abandonment of a water right and the criteria that constitutes the abandonment of a water right. And we think that adding this particular piece of language to that statute really undermines the law and compromises the integrity of the abandonment statute. Because, for example, right now under state law in Montana, the abandonment statute, there's several pieces that go to it, but bottom line is if you haven't exercised your water right in 10 successive years and there was water available to you, i.e. you're not in a 10-year drought or something like that, there was a water available to you and you have not exercised that right in 10 successive years, that constitute abandonment under Montana water law. What this bill would do is kind of defeats the purpose of having that span of time, those 10 years, because it just says that if you have a disruption in your means of conveyance, that's not abandonment. So for example, let's say you have a neighbor and the neighbor at some point in time filled in a ditch because they were changing up their management plan. Maybe they, converted that back to pasture and maybe they moved some of their irrigation over, or they did something different and they were not planning on using that ditch anymore. So they filled that ditch in. Let's say several years later down the road, somebody buys your neighbor's place and moves in. Under this bill, if it was passed as written, that new neighbor could clear that ditch back out and start diverting water again like nothing had ever happened, without actually having to go through the process of filing for that water again and getting a water right to use that ditch. So we understand what the intent of the bill is to do, but we also just think that we really need to prioritize the preservation of water rights for senior water rights holders and irrigators in the state, and we feel like this doesn't really do it. So we got a couple more questions.
Diana from Bozeman is watching. Thanks for tuning in. Hope things are going well in the office.
Yeah, happy Friday.
While Chelsea's looking at these questions, I'm just going to tell you about one more bill. We've almost been going for half an hour, so I think that's probably enough, and we probably need to get up to the Capitol and talk to people who are going to be voting on these things. But there was one, so yesterday was kind of full of some heavy bills. But earlier this week we had a little bit more lighter-hearted bill, and it was actually a really fun hearing, and it was interesting. You guys might not know that we have a policy in our policy book that says that we support standard time in Montana. Well, Senator Osmundson brought a bill that would put Montana on standard time, and we went and supported it. So I was, curious a little bit about the history. It's not something I was an expert on, so I did a little research, and I just want to read you some information that we found from the History Channel online. So this is apparently very interesting to a lot of people. And I'll just read it. Contrary to popular belief, American farmers were not the ones who lobbied for daylight saving time. Apparently there was some people who thought that farmers asked for it for more time to work in their fields, but that doesn't really make sense, does it, you farmers? So in fact, the agriculture industry was deeply opposed to the time switch when it was first implemented in March 1918 as a wartime measure. Here are some of the arguments that farmers made against daylight saving time. The sun, not the clock, dictated farmers' schedules, so daylight saving time was very disruptive. They had to wait an extra hour for dew to evaporate off of hay. Hired hands worked less since they were still left at the same time to go home for dinner. And cows are on a pretty regular milking schedule, and when the time changed, it was difficult for them to meet earlier shipping schedules. Agrarian interests actually led the fight in 1919 to repeal daylight saving time, and that was passed by Congress after they voted to override President Wilson's veto, which is pretty interesting. I don't think that happens much anymore.
Controversial topic.
Yes. And so actually, instead of rural interests, it's actually urban entities such as retail outlets and recreational businesses that have championed daylight saving time over the decades. And obviously a lot of that same sentiment remains, because in 2012, our members passed a policy supporting daylight saving time. So that
Standard time.
Sorry. Big flub there. Good catch, Chelsea. Yeah, supporting standard time. And so we supported Senate Bill 206, and it was heard in Senate Admin this week. Perhaps, that we're not sure, they haven't taken executive action, but it may be before the full Senate. It'll be interesting to hear the arguments for and against. I've heard a lot of people surprised that we were, that there were people involved in this bill, but we were a supporter, and there were actually opponents as well. The truckers don't like standard time, so it's an interesting and somewhat controversial yet not emotional issue. So I appreciate that, and just a little interesting kind of change of pace for you all. So we had one more question. We will answer that, and then we better get out of here.
Do some work. Okay, Pat wants to know new information on the budget for extension, MSU Research, and Department of Livestock. Good question. Those budget hearings were all heard very beginning of February, end of January, and initially had very good hearings. I think it went well. None of that stuff is moving very much. There haven't been a ton of updates yet. The appropriations subcommittees are finishing their work on going through the budgets, and then the additional. Oh, I see we're being heckled by a coworker. Anyway,
I thank you for helping us keep it lighthearted, Scott.
Oh, bother. Anyway, the subcommittees are finishing their work on going through the rest of the agency budgets, and then as the revenue bills have a later transmittal date with the budgets. And so really everything comes out of the woodwork for those departments and their agencies pretty late in the game, when everything shakes out and they really get to see what the bank accounts are going to look like. Everything so far has been positive for all of them. You may recall there were some pretty significant cuts to the extension service, which is unfortunate. We have worked to try to not necessarily restore them to a base level, because ultimately we don't think that's possible at this point in time. Montana is facing a budget shortfall. The budget is tight, and everybody needs to tighten the belt this time around. And Extension's willing to do that, but we are trying to see if there's a way that we can at least minimize the cuts to that entity. But there'll be more on that in the coming weeks as well.
For sure.
Let us know if you've got any questions. Things are really speeding up around here. The transmittal deadline is next week-ish. And so towards the end of next week, all of the general bills will have to be transmitted to the new house. So of course now it's a mad rush to get your bills into committees and get them heard and get them across the floor so they can be transmitted to the next house. So this week has been pretty busy. We expect next week to be very busy as well. So we'll probably have lots to talk about next week too. Let us know if anybody's got any questions. Please comment on the video if you're watching the replay. And I guess we'll talk to you next week. Anything else?
That more than covers it.
All right. Have a great Friday, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye.